Growing up as an average kid in America, it's hard to overstate the amount of time it took for me to really find my place among my peers. Through middle and high school, I never really found a solid footing in the teenage world until a good way into my junior year. Even then, I never really felt like I belonged anywhere in particular. My sense of self was constantly in question, and I wondered whether the few friends I had actually valued my company or simply recognized my face. It was hard to say the least, but looking back, I wouldn't change anything, if given the chance. Situations like this are the exact kind of thing that writers often keep in mind when developing their characters. Whether it's a protagonist in a literary classic or your average main cast of a shonen anime, teenage angst and sense of belonging are recurring themes in nearly all forms of fiction. Today I'd like to talk about two characters with a similar story from two vastly different mediums. Today I'd like to ask you to put aside your disbelief and hear me out, while I compare arguably the most iconic literary monster of all time to a blonde-haired anime boy from a Disney game. Now, before we begin, please keep in mind that I am not at all claiming that these connections are intentional in the slightest. I don't claim to know how Tetsuya Nomura's enigmatic mind functions, and frankly, I'd be floored if I found out that the thought of referencing such a prolific writer ever even crossed his mind. Obviously, what I'm saying here is probably a huge stretch, and I'm probably overthinking things. Actually, now that I think about it, the overall story and lore of Kingdom Hearts is so convoluted and full of holes, that's probably not that unbelievable.
Kairi's heart rests within you!
Kairi's inside me?
After all, a wise man once said, "Belts are like timelines, you can never have too many." It would hardly suffice to say that I like Roxas as a character quite a bit. I mean, it's easy to identify with him. His appearance in the secret ending of Kingdom Hearts 2 was an iconic moment with fans, not to mention he's just everything an edgy preteen who shops at Hot Topic would love. Second only to Axel in that regard. Of course, I was no exception to this, as even today his story and character tropes resonate with me, so much so that I named my cat after him.
Aww.
Unlike his namesake, though, he's a bit of a shithead. Anyway, getting to his origin story, and its relation with Mary Shelley's timeless horror classic. So, as we all likely know, if you've watched any sort of Frankenstein-related media, the story revolves around a monster created from discarded body parts in a lab by a mad scientist named Dr. Frankenstein. The guy ends up getting out, and he hunts down the doctor, seeking revenge for his broken promises. Now, as for Roxas, he was born by accident thanks to a little mishap with some darkness and Sora's heart being expelled from his body. He later joins the Organization 13, where he meets Axel and Shion, who quickly become his best friends. His experience with them is enough for another video entirely. Anyway, already you can probably see some parallels here. Frankenstein created a monster who was born with no real connection to anyone and immediately sought companionship in any form. Where the story diverges here, of course, is the circumstances of their birth, but the overall lack of purpose and belonging is clearly defined.
I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are.
Right after he is born, Roxas begins to get his bearings and tries, with minimal success, to understand the circumstances of his creation and why he exists, if he even does. He's taken in by the organization, who give him a place to belong, and eventually paves the way for his close-knit relationship with Axel and Shion. In the case of old Frankie, he has a similar experience. Almost immediately after he's created, he attempts to breach his restraints and instantly develops a complex about his purpose for existence. He lashes out and escapes the lab, pursuing his creator all across the country. Again, the story diverges a little here, but the point remains that both characters had issues with their sense of self, and didn't have the ability to track down a physical presence in their world, as they were created artificially, and without a family or any kind of relationships. These themes are relevant to both stories, but where they differ is the motives and outcome of their search for a sense of peace and belonging. At first, their reaction to discovering their existence is essentially an abomination is the same. Frankenstein's monster escapes his chambers and pursues his creator, leaving a trail of death and destruction in his wake. When Roxas discovers his lack of purpose, he reacts in a less violent but albeit similar manner. He revolts against the organization that lied to and manipulated him, and abandons them in search of Sora, who essentially created him and jeopardized his life, even if unintentionally. In the end, both of them are hunted down, and an attempt is made to stop them before any major damage is done.
No way! It's too soon. You can't seriously get rid of him.
It's an order. Why do you hesitate? You who has been ruthless towards those who turn their backs on the organization.
But it's not like that. He didn't betray us. He can't come back.
If he doesn't return, you know what you must do. Or you will face the consequences.
In both cases this fails, but Roxas's is a much more complex one. Where Frankie inevitably subdues his creator and roams free to terrorize anyone who meets him, Roxas is inevitably fought and defeated by Riku, Sora's longtime friend. Riku does this out of virtue and necessity, as Roxas threatens to prevent Sora from waking up from his sleep while his memories are restored. Roxas is placed inside a virtual reality where his desire for companionship is fulfilled once again, and his memory of anything outside of the digital Twilight Town he is placed in is wiped completely. Both Roxas and Frankenstein's monster were promised a sense of companionship, and both of them followed along in order to achieve it. Where the difference here lies, however, is the execution of said promise. Where Roxas was given an admittedly fragile sense of belonging and a few friends to call his own, the monster never gets the same luxury. His creator offers to create a female counterpart using excess cadavers and female parts, but never truly intends to do so, as his fear and loathing of his initial creation eats him away from inside. Thus, the monster lives and likely dies having never been given a friend or companion, and so he goes his entire existence alone, resenting humanity for being given all the things he himself was denied. On the other hand, Roxas is given what he was promised, in multiple ways. At first, it was in the form of his best friends at the organization, and later, his virtual companions in the data Twilight Town. In both instances, the promises made to him by the organization were technically delivered, even if under lackluster or downright false circumstances. However, when Roxas eventually discovers that the world he remembers growing up in is completely bogus, we see a similar reaction from him, as he destroys the computers that run the simulation he exists inside of, and ceases to exist as Sora reawakens. Whereas Roxas doesn't have a specific creator, at least not an intentional one, Frankenstein specifically set out to create artificial life. This is where we see the parallels in the way both characters were treated by their respective creators. Now, as I said before, Roxas was technically created by Sora when he expelled his own heart from his body, but in this case, we'll contend that Xemnas was the one who ultimately created Roxas. The lore gets confusing, but just roll with it for me. Frankenstein immediately grew terrified and sick over his creation, doing all he could to hide its existence and subdue it once it escaped. He doesn't see his creation as a person, or even a form of biological life, but rather as a crime against nature, an abomination against natural law. This is similar to how Xemnas treats Roxas, upon his joining the organization. Roxas is nothing more than an asset to him, as he is initially the only member who can wield a Keyblade and extract hearts. This is where things get complicated. Roxas is not a person in the eyes of Xemnas. He is a weapon, something that can be used to do his bidding for him. Roxas is crucial to his plans, but Xemnas sees no value in him as a person, especially so when Shion is created. To clarify, Shion is essentially a replica of Roxas and Sora, created from memories stolen from Sora while he sleeps. Her and Roxas slowly become friends over the course of their tenure at the organization, but eventually she surpasses him in strength and usefulness and is struck down by Roxas himself, before she is then forgotten by him and the rest of the organization. At the time, anyway.
It was my choice to go away now. Better that than to do nothing and let Xemnas have his way. I belong with Sora. And now I am going back to be with him. Roxas, I need you to do me a favor. All those hearts that I've captured, Kingdom Hearts, set them free.
Kingdom Hearts? Free them?
Unlike Frankenstein, Roxas' creators actually provided him with a counterpart of similar origin to call his friend, but similarly to Frankie's monster, this proves too good to be true. Finally, the time of vindication and vengeance is upon us, and both evil geniuses, Frankenstein and Xemnas, will get their comeuppance. However, the ways in which this happens for each respective story leave a bit of wiggle room as to their similarities. Frankenstein's story is pretty simple, in this case. He resents his creator for giving him life in a world that despises his very existence, and in a fit of rage after his promise of companionship is broken, he pursues Frankenstein and ruins his life by murdering his loved ones and leaving a path of destruction. The monster is then free to roam the forest and prey on anyone who crosses his path, as he lives a life of solitude and agony. On the other hand, Roxas is inevitably shoved into the back of Sora's mind, and exists inside his heart as a fate memory. As Sora's escapades grow bigger and grander, Roxas is eventually awoken inside of him, and the two of them clash once and for all. Here, instead of a bitter resentment and hatred for Sora, who is essentially his creator, Roxas is testing his virtue and the strength of his heart, as he comes to terms with allowing Sora to live in his stead. Inevitably, Sora triumphs, and the two reconcile, marking the first time Sora is ever made aware of Roxas' existence inside his own heart.
You make a good other. This could have been the other way around.
Huh?
But it really has to be you.
What do you mean?
There are so many hearts that are connected to yours. You're me, so you can feel what I felt.
No. Roxas, you're you. We're not the same. I wanted to tell you that you deserve as much as I do to be your own person.
Cut to a few months later, during the events of Kingdom Hearts 3, Roxas is given life once again inside the body of a replica, where he joins the fight against Xehanort and the new organization, only to face his former master, Xemnas, as he appears to help his old friends escape his clutches. He faces off against Saix, an old friend of Axel's, who resented Roxas for taking his friend away from him. With this, and the inevitable defeat of Xehanort by Sora, Roxas defeats his former associates and is reunited with his friends, hopefully for good. Now obviously, the story of a 19th century horror novella and a Square Enix video game series could not be more different, and I don't even mean to claim that they're similar in merit or quality with their storytelling. One of them is a classic timeless story with multiple iterations and retellings across multiple generations, and the other is a video game about spiky-haired anime boys with giant keys for weapons. Still, the parallels are hard to ignore once they're made apparent, even if the two have very different stories. Roxas ends up with a pretty happy ending, one that likely made fans ugly cry, as he finally got what he always wanted. Frankenstein and his monster, however, were not so lucky.
Roxas, don't be sad. I came from you and Sora. I am you, the same way that I am Sora. You'll forget me, but the memories themselves will never go away. Memories of you and me will always be together, forever inside him.